Hello, everyone. Welcome to Claret and Booze, a very impromptu show today. Look, as we all know, this transfer window is running on and on and on, and none of us can make head nor tail of it. We're being linked with all manner of players in the media. You know, 1 minute we're being told that talks are at an advanced stage, and the next minute they're not. 1 minute a deal's done, the next minute it's not. We're approaching 50% of the way through the transfer window. We've got as much more business to do based on what was set out in terms of the roadmap from Graham Potter on the board, from what we could pick up on before this window closed. We've got more to do than anyone else. So why are we not doing any business? And, you know, some of the messaging coming out from the likes of X a couple of days ago, it was, we're now narrowing down targets and we should be making moves in the next couple of weeks. I mean, this is ridiculous. We've got a squad of players that are coming into the club on Monday morning, which is basically the same team that would have left, minus a couple of that have left on free transfers because it was the end of their contracts. These players, we know, look, Graham Potter wasn't quoted as saying that he didn't want any of these players, but the club made it very clear that he has ruled out. He's basically put the majority of the team. He said that they're expendable. I think it was only Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Bowen were the only two players that were kind of exempt from being sold. So how's that gonna feel when he walks in? So we're gonna try and pick for everything. Look, and I've got a very special guest that's on the line at the moment, and I'm going to bring him in shortly. We'll do a QA after as well. So don't ask any questions yet, please, because I won't see him. I can't multitask, and they'll just get lost in the chat. So when I say it's QA time, drop your questions in, and I'll star some, and we'll try and get through them. I'm going to be a little bit robotic with this because, as we know from those that watched our last interview, it's very important that the anonymity of this lovely man is protected. So I'm going to keep correcting myself and probably talk a lot slower than I normally do. I've got X written in front of me all over this pad. So this is Mr. X that we're going to be talking to tonight. You got his backstory last time in terms of the credibility of the man, the amount of deals that he's been involved with, and he's from West Ham fans' point of view, the likes of Lanzini, the list goes on and on and on. And talk about players that we could have brought in as well. That's heartbreaking. But he's got a very, very good insight. He's been in the industry for absolutely donkey's years. And he knows an awful lot more than me and any of us in the chat as well. So we're going to try and understand what is going on in this window. There's probably only so much that he can say because, you know, he can't be too candid because he can't for legal reasons. But so when it comes to question time, just be very clever with your questions and and we'll try and get as much out of him as we can. Right, I'm going to bring him in now. X, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You can. Did you hear me waffling on there for a little bit?
Good afternoon. Thanks for the invite. Albeit at short notice.
Yeah. An hour ago.
It's what it is, yes.
Have you found yourself a nice, comfortable little room in the house?
Well, I've actually found myself outside in the back garden.
Oh, nice evening, though, so that's all right. It's not too bad.
Yeah. Let's hope it doesn't start raining.
Yeah. So I think, as you can understand, West Ham fans are they're pulling their hair out at the moment because we don't really know what to expect. We've still got that as far as I'm concerned, a very, very good, talented squad of players, albeit there are gaps that need filling. But we've still got that at the moment, and we're kind of being linked. I think the running number at the moment is 160 players that we've been linked with so far in this window. None of us know what's going on. I think if we start on the money side of it, I know that you can't talk factually on this. You're not involved in in the club or in accounts, but when they say that they're skint and it's PSR and this, that, the other. Well, for a start, the PSR charts came out via The Athletic a little while ago. When it comes to PSR, we're okay at the moment. We're not next year because that Declan Rice money falls off. But at the moment, as it stands, we can spend. There's about £95 million worth of wiggle room. So when you consider that at the moment we can sell players, we can do this and we can do that, what do you make of this we can't buy anyone until we sell policy at the moment? Does that make sense to you in the situation that we're in?
To be honest with you, I've been careful even in the previous or first chat that we had, not to focus. Even though I know you're a West Ham fan and you want to talk specifically about West Ham.
Yeah.
Um, I want to talk in general about football fans, football clubs,
Yep.
and effectively what we have by virtue of channels like yourself and even social media now is the opportunity to have a voice that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
And so, effectively, football fans are not stupid. Uh, we, as football fans, we all love the game. We love our teams. We pay for our season tickets. We buy shirts. We stream matches. We like to debate results with great passion and so forth and so forth. So basically, what we really need to be more of is be more informed.
Yep.
And so before we even talk specifically about what any club, including your club, is doing in the transfer window, we need to actually delve a bit into the shackle of what I call PSR.
Right.
Because, and it's also very important that before we can talk about what players are coming in or going out, that we understand the machinery which behind what makes players go out or come in.
Right.
Um, because until we understand those rudimentaries, then really we are only scratching at the surface as to why things do or do not happen in the transfer window.
But do you think? I know you're not, you don't really want to answer anything sort of directly connected to West Ham. But do you, when you see the likes of Man City just going out there spending like they spend, it doesn't matter. When you see Chelsea going out there spending like they spend, it doesn't matter. Millions and millions and millions of pounds. Do you not think that some clubs, let's say some clubs, use PSR as more of an excuse than others?
Well, I will answer that question. Um, I will answer that question eventually, but I think you actually citing Manchester City is exactly one of the reasons why it's important that I go into the background of PSR,
Yeah.
because in reality, PSR is a set of financial rules which was designed to ensure football clubs operate within their means and do not spend more than they earn.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to limit how much financial loss a club can make over a rolling 3-year period. For example, in the Premier League, clubs are supposed to be allowed to lose up to £105 million over 3 years. In the EFL Championship, clubs are supposed to be able to lose up to £39 million over 3 years. But here comes the caveat. Not all expenses count towards this limit. There are exceptions for investment in stadiums, youth development, women's football, and so on.
Yeah.
So, what was the aim of the PSR? The aim was for financial stability, to prevent clubs from going bankrupt by overspending on transfer wages,
So
to
so what so what
enable
why
fair.
why doesn't it take into account all aspects of the finances of a club? Is that what
Well,
you're
it
saying?
doesn't take. Well, that's the whole point, because
Yeah.
when any rules are brought in by any system, it's brought in because it's always, well, 9 out of 10 times it's to favor those that are already favored.
Yeah.
You understand? So, whereas it's supposed to, for example, bring in fair competition, and that clubs don't buy success unfairly with sustainable cash injections from wealthy owners, in reality, because it also affects the proportion of monies that can be spent by the smaller clubs, which didn't have it in the first place.
It's ring fencing the
Then in
big. It's
fact,
ring fencing
really,
the
it
big teams,
doesn't
isn't it?
change. It doesn't change anything,
Yeah.
and in fact, it allows the bigger teams to still spend more than the smaller teams could spend, even with the restriction. Are you with me?
I am, but
Yeah.
I know you're kind of keen to sort of not solely focus on West Ham, and we will get back to this. But when you look at the stats at the moment, financially, West Ham are the 17th richest club in world football. 17th. So,
Yeah.
so therefore, we should be up there in terms of our PSR limits and what we can and what we can't do. And what really frustrates me is you've got some clubs that are ambitious. Now I know what you're saying. Some clubs get they get ring fenced. What PSR has done is it's ring fenced the big clubs. It's keeping the big clubs big and it's keeping the small clubs small. But nonetheless, they still find loopholes. I mean, Chelsea have had to find loopholes. Man City don't find loopholes. They just do what they fucking want and go to court after. But there's Chelsea sold their ladies football team back to themselves for 200 million. I think Aston Villa have done the same. So you've got these clubs, even though they're a little bit bigger, and PSR kind of it doesn't help them, but they find ways. Whereas I feel like for owners of clubs that don't want to spend money and that do want to be West Ham, I feel like PSR is just used as an excuse. That's how I feel. Because other clubs can do it. Other clubs do it, you know. I know that we have seen a few instances in recent years of Everton where they've suffered as a result of PSR breaches and stuff like that. But I just for me, I know it's a big thing. And I know it's a big deal. I know what you're saying is true. PSR was supposed to have been brought in to maintain sustainability of football and stop clubs going out of business and this, that, the other. But we all know that deep down it wasn't. It was there to maintain the status quo, keep the big clubs big, and that's all that was. But
Yeah.
we ain't a little club though. West Ham ain't little.
Nick, let's get to how we're able to ascertain that West Ham is the 17th richest club. How did we get to that analysis?
No, that's just in the in I think it was in the Forbes list of football clubs.
Based on what, uh, income from gate receipts, transfer players,
I'm assuming I'm
injection of
assuming
money by
I'm assuming
owners.
it's a collective. It's got to be.
Okay, so the bottom line is, if West Ham is the 17th richest club, then it follows that West Ham should also then be the 17th most active um, club in the transfer window.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. So, but we're seeing right now that the football transfer business, particularly since the introduction of PSR, has affected not just your club, but clubs throughout the world. The problem with that is that in order for you as a 17th place club in terms of the
Finances.
rich
Yeah.
finance table, or the richness table, whatever we want to call it, it means that still you have to be effectively um, a feeder club for the bigger clubs in order to sustain your financial responsibility and stability.
Oh,
And so,
I accept that. I think when you're West Ham versus Chelsea, I think Chelsea and Man City can afford to be blasé, go out there, spend 80 million and get it wrong, and they can go again. Whereas if West Ham do that, it hurts us. We've got to be very shrewd with our money. We've got to go out there and buy players that are assets that will grow. That's I
yeah,
think is that what you're saying?
yes, but I think fundamentally right now, fans, football clubs, and the football industry need to understand that my perception of PSR is that it's a fallacy.
Yeah.
It's a fallacy that, irrespective of the other idiosyncrasies in any individual club, or any lack of ambition or ability to spend or willingness to spend. The PSR has provided almost a cover or a blanket for even unambitious owners to hide behind with some kind of credibility.
Yeah.
And in reality, we know, for example, that a club like West Ham, especially if it's going to uh, stay within the confines of the so-called financial responsibility as was intended by PSR,
Yeah.
that even if its owner had, as alleged by the owners, is publicly alleged that, for example, Newcastle has so much resources, but they can't spend. The reality is that there are always going to have to be one or two players of significance that a club like West Ham will need to sell in order to create the kind of income to bridge the gap between, what would I say, irresponsible spending and spending.
Yeah.
But there lies the problem. Because while you're trying to, as a smaller club, in effect, trying to work within the confines and realize that you need to sell a player, the problem is that even the clubs that are supposed to be more capable and bigger than you and should be able to buy that player, they are also restricted by the same rule not to be able to buy the player in order to create the income that you need to buy a player.
So I know we've seen that. We've seen an example of that, haven't we? In I think it was in past few seasons where it comes up to that kind of end of June deadline, and you saw players going on a mad clubs going on a mad scramble, doing some really weird like transfers. It was almost like they was doing player exchanges for money, just so they could kind of move money about. So clear, I think Aston Villa did it, and because they're another club, aren't they? You know, even though they've done well for the past few years and they've got into Europe. And they've done well. They've been in the Champions League. I think this is the second successive year now where they've kind of had to sell. They've had to sell before they could spend as well because they've spent too much money. They had to sell Diaby, didn't they? To I think he went to Saudi, didn't he? Diaby, and we were obviously there was Duran as well, but we won't go there. But yeah, it is.
Well, when you look, for example, that Aston Villa, for example, has sold unexpectedly because nobody ever envisaged that the two players in particular that they sold, one of them was Diaby, I can't remember who the other one, even before Duran, that even before the sale of Duran, they had amassed £100 million when looking from the outside.
It was it
Those
was it was
players
the it
on
was the other
paper.
it was the other Brazilian midfielder, wasn't it? I can't remember his name now. I can't think who it was. But yeah, two big players they had to sell.
Yeah, the reality was that nobody had valued those players. But certainly, I don't think Aston Villa had valued each of those players at around £50 million at the time when they were scrambling to not breach the rules, which was at the time at which early in the transfer window when West Ham could have had a possible bargain of getting in Duran, because at that time they were very frightened that without selling a player that they would have breached the rules.
Yeah.
Of course, it was by virtue of being able to sell those two players for those unexpected amounts that the necessity to spend Duran was not immediate, and obviously then led to West Ham having to, well,
So
put themselves in a
so
position
so
where they couldn't.
so are you saying that sometimes it pays dividends to act early, and if we'd have gone early on Duran, then maybe we might have got that deal done, and the same in this window as well. You know, when all clubs, like you say, are kind of constrained by this PSR, they're more likely to give you a bargain before that deadline, aren't they?
Yeah, but this is the problem, because if you know you're shackled by something, and that shackle can cause your problem, there comes the necessity for planning in advance of the window opening.
Yeah.
There lies the responsibility to have the kind of personnel that are adept and proficient enough to be able to put the club in a position where immediately the window is open, everything is already in play, ready to make sure that you are not shackled by the shackle of PSR.
Yeah.
Now, speaking to any manager about especially foreign players, one of the things that they have always said is that we don't want to buy players in the January transfer window. And the reason why they always give that they don't want to buy players in the January transfer window is because the window is so narrow that it doesn't give them the opportunity. In fact, it's not even narrow because the team is playing in January,
Yeah.
so there is no space at all. So when a player is bought in January, the player has to hit the ground running if that transfer is going to be a success. So generally, clubs like to do their business, especially on more expensive players, in the summer transfer window when they can have a preseason with the player.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the way certain clubs operate, including your club, is that the summer transfer window is no different from the January transfer window because you're buying players even the night before the window closes.
Yeah.
Okay, so in effect, really, one of the problems what that I believe that clubs that behave that way don't succeed is because the whole point of having the preseason to effectively um, uh, acclimatize the players and get them ready for playing at the beginning of the season is lost because the planning prior to the window opening, even in the summer transfer window, has not been uh, put in place properly to facilitate the early incoming
Are you
players.
talking about the financial planning so you're good to go and you can just act?
Not only the financial planning, but also the recruiting planning.
Yeah, because let me give you a quick rundown of what we've been told as fans and how we understand as fans that we are approaching this window. So as you know, Macaulay is in, who's was only ever an analyst before, and he's Potter's. He's he's not a director of football, but he's a head of recruitment now, or head of player identification, whatever that is. Potter and Macaulay are working on identifying targets. Apparently, they have a list. They've been working on that list for 6 months, but they made a point. They've been quoted that they will not be using the agent route, the intermediary route moving forward. So David Sullivan and Karen Brady, as we understand it, are going to be doing the negotiations on business. Now we know that in the past that isn't how West Ham have operated. They've always had other people to help them. How do, I know there's only so much you can say, right? But how do you see, in terms of, because you're saying about planning there, so you can have your list all you want, you can have done all your preparation and all your legwork, but then if you've got a situation where you haven't got people that are good enough to get deals over the line, how important is it? Now, let's not talk about directors of football of the past or anything else, but how critical is it for a club to have a man in that position? So you've drawn your list up, you then go and give it to someone that is capable of selling the dream to a player and sealing the deal. How important is that position at a football club when you're a club like West Ham?
Listen, it's a fallacy. It's a fallacy for especially a club like West Ham to talk about not using agents
Yeah,
for bringing in players.
yeah,
And even if that is the intention, that would something that have to be done in the medium to long term. It couldn't be done in the immediate term
mm,
because West Ham strictly does not have the international connections directly as a club
no,
to be able to deal, for example, directly with a Palmeiras or a Botafogo or a Fluminense or a Boca Juniors or a River Plate or uh, any club abroad. Because even if they're going to put scouting facilities and position scouts in all of those territories, it won't be something for this window. It will be something, if it can be brought to fruition, for something for the longer term. So at this moment in time, really, and when you deal in territories, for example, like South America, 9 out of 10 times, really, you cannot get anything done with all the best intent in the world without an agent.
yeah,
Because number one, all clubs that that have players in territories like South America, Central and North America in particular. And if we're looking at the moment, for example, at the World Cup of Clubs, we will see that there are some quite interesting players playing for the likes of Palmeiras,
Yeah.
Fluminense, Botafogo, and so forth. But but in reality, what happens is that all of those clubs get their players via agents.
Yeah.
All of those clubs, for you to do any deal with them, you have to involve their agents. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest problems that is still in existence in football, which is handicapping what Europe wants to do, is that Europe wants to see itself as uh, being squeaky clean and doesn't want to be involved, for example, in party ownership.
Yeah.
But in reality, really, most of the players that you're likely to get from abroad, like it or not, does have third party ownership because, in fact, they're presented to the clubs who you're sourcing them from with the third party ownership. And obviously, you can't dissociate yourself from the third party ownership, even though you may try to follow the rules. But the reality is, most of the top name players that are coming into Europe and into England, it's only because the authorities are turning a blind eye because of the so-called super agents that are involved with them.
Yeah.
But in reality, you cannot get a deal done without talking to those agents.
No, that's right.
So talking about cutting out agents is a fallacy.
And it is. I've done some reading on this. It is third party ownership. It's not nothing that, not even anything that you've told me. It is third party ownership because, with all due respect, what these people do is they target players and they almost buy the rights to them. Well, not buy the rights, but they do it in other ways. They get them on board with them. So in a sense, they're paying up front to represent that player so that they can have all of the, you know, all the goods from moves that come later, I'm assuming.
Well, this is the problem at the moment, because when you get into the domain of an agent not just offering his credentials to a player in order to represent that player, but in effect buying the rights to that player,
Yeah.
it means that they have total control over even what the player wants to do.
Yeah.
So, in effect, really, the decision to move a player is not solely down to where the player wants to go, but also because of the financial necessity of recoupment of the investment that was placed in that player in the first place by that agent, whereby that agent has to make sure that the next deal is such. And remember, no agent that is going to invest in a player is going to invest in one in which he doesn't see effectively some kind of equity.
Yeah.
Yes. So, in other words, really, that's why, for example, I cannot understand when certain clubs, without mentioning your club or any club, align themselves with so-called super agents, when it's those super agents that are really the ones that are at the helm of the third-party ownership. Because when those agents have the players that they have invested in, they want to maximize the return on the initial investment. They're not going to achieve that from your club. They're going to go for the bigger clubs, the Manchester
Of course
Cities,
they
the
are.
Real Madrid,
Yeah.
and so forth, right? So, in effect, really, you aligning yourself as a smaller club with a super agent, really, it's only for some superficiality to make you feel like you're important.
Yeah.
But the real importance that you want to achieve is to get the top best quality player that you can have in your club.
Tell me.
But the best quality player in your club is not going to be achieved from a super agent, because the super agent wants to also align himself with the top clubs to maintain his status as a super agent.
Absolutely. So tell me this, right? As a scenario, you know, talking about, because I'm a West Ham fan. So a club like West Ham, if you align yourself with a so-called super agent that's got a massive back catalogue of players, in my opinion, they're always going to be looking to move their better players onto the more glamorous clubs, because that is what keeps their players coming in. It keeps their reputation going. The only time that West Ham are ever really going to get a sniff of a player from them is if nobody else wants them. You've got a player coming towards the end of their, the end of their career, they're getting older, then they might introduce someone into West Ham, or if there's a problem with that player. The people that West Ham should be dealing with are not the super agents, in my opinion. It is proper agents. It's people that go out there that scout talent, that look at the intricacies of the club that they're working for, and they go, right, I've identified you need this, this, and this, and then they go out and they find the value for money. Going back to what you was talking about PSR earlier on, where clubs like West Ham, even though we're the 17th richest club in the world, we still need to be run as a business. We still need to be buying players that bring value later on. You're not going to get that if you're attaching yourself to super agents. You're just not, because you're just going to get rinsed. And that is what has been proven at West Ham. That's why at the moment we're in the financial situation that we're in. When you look at this last season, we had the smallest and the oldest squad of players. And that's after spending almost £500 million in 4 years and 5 years. That's negligence as far as I'm concerned. But going back to the point that I said to you, so West Ham they've got their coming into this window, they've got their list of targets all sorted. You've got our master negotiators in Brady and Sullivan. We know that they're not, all right? You haven't got a comment. So let's just act on the premise that West Ham currently do not have a director of football. They don't have that man that can negotiate. How important is that, man? Because, listen, I've known you for a long time, and I've seen the way that you work. You could sell ice to the Eskimos, mate. You're unbelievable. How important is it to have someone that can do that with a player?
Well, actually, probably easier for me to sell ice to the Eskimos than to a player to your club. But never mind.
I know. But do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. How important is that role for a club like West Ham, especially at the minute?
Okay. So you've asked a very important question.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, the only way any club can benefit from a sports, a sports director, is if the sports director is not aligned to the manager.
Yeah.
And is totally independent.
Yeah.
And the sports director is put in place to continue the continuity of the style of play and the recruitment and the type of players being recruited, even beyond the tenure of the manager.
Yeah.
In other words, the manager should not, in my opinion, and I'm sure it's a general consensus of opinion by anybody.
I know what you're going to say, and I agree already.
Yeah. No manager should have the right to be involved in even the recruitment of the sporting director. In fact, the sporting director should be one that he's also overseeing. He's almost like the security who's overseeing the security of the owner, to ensure that the manager is kept in line in all aspects of the club's sporting perspectives and in particular recruitment. And so he needs to dissociate himself from being aligned with the manager.
Yeah.
Because there is no point in getting a manager to bring in his friend as a sporting director, where he can influence that so-called sporting director or recruitment personnel as to who should come into the club, because it means that the players that he's being directed to get in are only for the purposes or the style or formation that he sees that he wants to implement during the time of his tenure with the club. But when he's sacked or he leaves, then really the purpose of the sporting director is irrelevant, because it means that the new person coming in may not want the players that the previous manager who was associated with the sporting director, and therefore you have a problem now where West Ham has to rush to sell players and cannot get the value back because those players are not really wanted by the new manager.
No.
And because other clubs know that they're not wanted by you, then you can't really demand or bargain to get the right price for them, because everybody knows their surplus requirements.
And we're having to sell them at more or less a loss as well. So to kind of put this in, I suppose, more of a crude fashion from our point of view, how I envisage it should work in a director of football model, which is how the majority of Premier League clubs work now. Even Sunderland went out and appointed a director of football, and he's been doing some good business. Brentford have always had one. Most clubs have got them now. But as you've said, they should be independent. The director of football should be God. They set the philosophy. They appoint. They set the philosophy. They bring in players with the scouting department to fit a certain style, and they appoint coaches that are capable of coaching players for that team. Now, if the coach goes, like at Brentford, all they've got to do is go out and get another coach. Everything else stays the same. You know, all the players, providing you're going out there and the director of football is doing his job properly, and he's going out and getting a coach that can get the best out of what you've got, then that's fine. But when you're in a situation that West Ham are in, which is how we've always been, whether it was Moyes, whether it was Lopetegui, whether it was whoever, we are constantly building teams in the manager's image all the time. It's always David Moyes' West Ham, Lopetegui's West Ham. It's always their players. Like Lopetegui wanted Kilman. Look how that's gone, 40 million. I mean, that's a perfect example. And I just feel like it's so short-sighted because we've said before on a conversation, what's the average lifespan of a manager now? You probably get 2 years if you're lucky. So to build and spend that much money on a squad...
Yes, Nick, but there's a problem here. Because we still don't understand what a sporting director is.
Go on.
We didn't say we didn't say player recruitment manager, did we?
No.
We said a sporting director.
Yeah.
The sporting director is responsible for all of the sporting aspects of the footballing perspectives of the club.
Yeah.
In other words, the sporting director shouldn't be so close with the manager that he can't sack him.
Yeah.
The sporting director's responsibility is to hire and fire even the manager.
Yeah.
Therefore, if the manager is responsible for bringing in the sporting director, in legal terms, we have what is called a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Because if I bring you in as my sporting director, as a friend, you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you.
No, not at all.
But in the overall interest of the club, by not being able to sack you because I brought you in as my friend, that is to the detriment of the club, because even though you see things are not going well, you have to still maintain the status quo and toe the line.
Can I ask you what you would say? A common thing that I push back against constantly, because I've always been in favour, especially after what we've learned as West Ham fans. Some of us just don't learn. I'm dead against doing this. I'm dead against letting a manager buy his team. The common thing that we get, which was an excuse for Potter not doing well last year, was it's not his team. Wait until he gets his players. What would you say to that fan?
That is the problem. That's the problem. Anytime I hear a manager says that, can you imagine if every time you get a general manager of a company, he has to bring in a new receptionist, new accountant, new legal advisor, change the whole staff because it wasn't his staff, so they're not working efficiently?
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't happen. In a normal world, it wouldn't happen.
The bottom line is this. The manager is coming to a club. The club has got its requirements, i.e., administrative staff, accounting staff, player staff. If the manager is going to have an interview, he ought to know when he's coming in that the players that are there are not fit for his purpose.
Yeah.
I find it quite fraudulent that a manager should take an interview and try to succeed a manager that is probably not going through a good time. And the only way he could probably entice an owner to give him a job is by saying he can do a better job than the previous manager is doing.
With the players. He'll look at the squad and go, yeah, I can do better than that other guy with these players. Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have never seen a manager that is appointed, and when he's appointed, he says, okay, guys, I'm going to be the new manager. And here, sat beside me, is my new 23 squad of players.
Is it a red flag in your opinion if a manager struggles and says, well, basically, we're going to have to bin this lot and buy some new players? Is that a red flag?
It's more than a red flag.
I know.
It's more than a red
I
flag.
know. I know.
It's more than a red flag because the reality is this: when a manager takes a job on or intends to take a job on, I would imagine as part of his due diligence as to whether he wants a job is to assess the squad.
Yeah.
A manager, in my view, should know and have seen the team play,
Yep.
should know and have seen the previous manager in action, should know and have been able to see what the deficiencies of the previous managers are and how he's going to bridge those deficiencies. And more importantly, really, he ought to know from the outset what players are contracted to the club, how long is still left in their contracts, because legally, no matter if you want to change the whole players in the squad, they do have contracts.
Yeah.
And unless they decide to leave or another club is willing to buy them, and even if another club is willing to buy them and are not willing to go to that club, then you're still going to be left with them. So you can't go in trying to be the manager from the outset thinking, when I go in, I'll get the players that I want, and then I'll be able to perform. You need to know that you're capable, with a little tweaking, of making the team that is already in existence perform better than it's been performing.
Yep. 100%. That's my take on it as well. But it's very difficult, you know. I think a lot of fans, and this isn't a criticism of them. I think because it's how football used to work, isn't it? You know, managers used to be God. They did. Managers used to do a lot.
Sadly, I hear fans falling for the same trick.
It's what they want now. It's West Ham fans. A lot of them. This is what they want. They are bang on board with it. They're ignoring what happened under Moyes. They're ignoring, if we are in financial ruin at the moment, it's because we ended up, after spending $500 million, and we ended up with the oldest and smallest squad. It's because of that. It's because we went with the manager is God model, and then we did it with Lopetegui, and we wasted 40 million on Kilman. It's that, but there are still fans that go, no, Potter, wait until Potter gets his players, and you're like, oh my God. Now look, I can't blame the fans for it because look, we're not the experts. We're not the experts, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. But for me, I just don't see that at this point, being a West Ham fan, after what we've witnessed, how you can't get it. It baffles me. And we're going down the same path again. And I know we are. Well, we are because the club have more or less said that that's what's happening. So for me at the moment, so say for instance now, right? Players report back to training on Monday. Very awkward first day for Graham Potter because there's a lot of players there that probably know he don't want them. But he obviously has still got a lot of work to do. Do you think, let me ask you, I know you don't know, just an opinion, right? Just an opinion. Do you think that West Ham could arrive at a stage where they go, Graham, we're running out of time here. This, what you wanted to do, we're not going to be able to do because we can't shift the players that you wanted to shift. You're going to have to either sink. You're going to have to either swim or fucking sink and do the best with these players with what you've got. Could we arrive at that stage at West Ham?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know how correct you are, but I don't know how correct you are. But listen to one of your shows before I came on to speak to you. You've mentioned that all but two of your players are available for sale.
Well, that was reported on Claret and Hugh, and that was quoted from the senior source. And we know the senior sources.
So let me ask you, how many players are in your squad?
At the moment? I mean, we've lost a few. We've lost a few because obviously their contracts ran out. And we've had a few players return from loan, the likes of, some young kids. We've got Earthy Potts and players like that have come back. 21 players, 22 players, something like that.
Let's forget about your squad. Yeah. How many players are on the pitch at any given time?
11. Of course.
Okay. How many players can you add to the pitch in terms of substitute in any given match?
Lots.
No, no, you can only, I think you can only make 5 changes, right?
Yeah, you can make 5 changes, but you can have, I think it's
Yeah, you can have as
eight or
many people
nine,
on the
eight or
bench. You
nine
can have,
subs. Yeah.
yes, but you can only, but ultimately, really, you can only use 16 players in any match, right?
Yes, 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 yeah.
Okay, so let's put it this way. Let's forget about the extent of the squad or how many people are in the squad. You know, at any given time, you need at least 16 players, don't you?
Yeah.
So if you're telling me that the manager, and I'm not quoting this myself, I'm just going by what you've said that you've got from reliable source, that the manager only sees 2 players are important to for his requirements,
2 players that are
then
not for sale. That was a quote. There are only 2 players that are not for sale.
absolutely, then it means at least 14 players have got their nose out of joint at the moment.
Yeah.
So really,
Can
this
I
this
just
is
just
one of
ju- let me just interrupt you there? Can I ask you something? Because the industry that you're involved with, you know players, you know how their minds work. You do, right? Will
yes.
that piss certain players off? Can no no no? Will that message, knowing that you're basically expendable, is that motivational or is that going to piss you off?
Listen, I don't know why people think football players are some kind of robots or something. Yeah, yeah. But let me put it this way: if you're in your office and you know that your boss is not a big fan of yours, are you going to feel good about it?
Exactly. I know. I know.
Right now, one thing I do know about players is that players are very emotional. Players are very egotistical. Players love to be loved.
Yeah.
Players love adulation. Players love to feel that they're the most important thing, for want of a better term, since sliced bread.
Yeah.
No player wants to know that they are not important. Okay? So if you know from the outset that you're not important, then that also manifests itself in the way you play.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of players, for example, even in your club, that they're playing even before the season finished with a level of uncertainty, a level of uncertainty of not knowing whether they'll be pulled off in the next 10 minutes or not. When a player is not sure about his position in the team, the player cannot perform, because it's like, for example, if you're working in a job and you know that you're surplus to requirements.
You're not valued.
You're not valued. You're worried about, am I going to be sacked tomorrow?
Yeah.
Am I going to lose my job? Is somebody coming to replace me? Now, you may be strong enough to be able to overcome that and show the owner or the manager that, listen, even though I know what your intentions about me are, I'm going to show you that I'm better than anything else you can bring in.
Yeah.
But players generally don't think like that. Players, all of a sudden, when they realize they're not that important, they become nervous,
Yeah.
they're unsure about what they're doing, and some of them can even go to the extent of what we call downing tools.
Yeah. Well, we've seen
So,
we've
in
seen
other
it. We've
words,
seen it
really,
before, haven't we? We've seen it with players before. Everyone's
I,
different, and I think that's the skill of a manager, surely. And it's the same in any business,
well,
not just in football. If you're managing any team of people, every single person needs approaching differently. Some need an arm around
listen
them.
to me.
Some need to be be a bit firmer with them. It's that's the skill of a manager.
It's not just the skill of a manager; it's also the skill of the skill of a parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you have 2 or 3 children, you can't deal with them the same way. Some of them you can shake them up a little bit. Some of them you can talk a bit louder with. Some of them you can coax, and some of them you can, effectively smile with them and just look at them, and they'll know what your intentions are. Yes. So the reality is, I don't understand why people think football and football players are so different from anything else that happens in life. Players are now away, for example, on holidays or international duty, and they're aware that they're not really that important to the manager. They're thinking, what am I coming back to? Am I going to be sold just before the window closes? Am I going to be replaced in my position, and instead of being a first choice, I'm going to be a third choice or not a choice at all?
Yeah.
It's not a good way to prepare your team in advance of a new season.
Well, also as well, another question. As we know, West Ham have adopted this one in, and it's proving to be true because we're signing nobody. So they've been saying the whole way through this window via not just the media channels, they've been saying it via the official ones. You know, Bailey, Steinberg, people like that, Matt Law, saying that West Ham will not buy a player until we sell. So it's one out, one in. Okay, so we sell a player. We're going to sell them at under what they're worth, as you've already explained, because everybody knows that these players are surplus to requirements, and we're over a barrel financially. When it comes to getting their replacements in for West Ham at the moment, isn't it important? Is it from getting inside the psyche of a player? Because, like I said, you've worked with a lot of them. Is it important to a player for the team that they're going to, i.e. characters in a team? Are they going to be players? Would it be like beneficial for West Ham for players to know that they're going to have the likes of a Kudus or an Alvarez or a Paqueta? Will players want that? They'll see that and go, yeah, I'd quite like to go and play with him. Is it not going to be difficult for West Ham to sell this to players, to top players that are going to have other clubs interested in them as well? When there's so much uncertainty, you don't know really who you're going to be playing with because there's so many on their way out. Is that a problem? Would that be a problem that you see for us?
Okay. So, like I said, I try to steer away from the specificity of West Ham and talk generally. But
Yeah.
I think on this particular particular question that you just asked me, I can actually tell you the relevance of that question in relation to your club, West Ham.
Yeah.
Uh, and and I can tell you now, for example, that irrespective of what anybody thinks about the tenure of David Moyes, or whether he was a good manager, or whether his style of football was good or whatever, one thing that West Ham did achieve was winning a cup.
Yeah.
Okay, one thing that West Ham did achieve is being seen continuously in Europe. One thing that would have alert uh, uh, well, one thing that would have made the likes of Kudos, for example, want to come to West Ham because they see what was an upward trajectory in terms of West Ham has the potential to win something. Okay, so one thing that will have alerted other players to come to West Ham, even in the previous last window, is that they see the likes of Kudos and Paqueta and players of that ilk are coming to the club.
Yeah.
But when you have a situation where it's the converse of that, where the likes of Kudos are leaving, unless it's really young players who are just hungry and really haven't achieved anything yet and just want to prove a point or get into the system and see the Premier League as somewhere that they want to come to, but maybe not necessarily being able to get into one of the clubs of the higher echelon in terms of, for example, a Manchester City or clubs that are already in the Champions League, yeah, then you're going to find yourself in a position whereby the attraction of players considered to be of a certain caliber leaving the club is going to make players. And this is where also super agents come into effect as well.
Yeah.
Because if a super agent who even wants to persuade a player to come to West Ham sees that the better players are leaving West Ham, they're going to be more inclined to steer them away from West Ham because they don't see how the value of their player is going to be maintained by them coming to a club that may or may not win anything,
Yeah.
or may not be challenging for anything, or may even worse be challenging to be to be relegated.
Yeah. So it's a problem, basically.
Of course,
It's it's a
of
problem.
course, it's a problem.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a problem,
Yeah.
and that's why probably the focus might be, for example, as I'm hearing it, for the recruitment to be more concentrated into lesser known players, into
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. That's the names that we're seeing, we've never heard of, mate. We've never heard of some of these players. Look, and
yeah.
I don't mind that. I don't mind getting a few players in that are playing in different leagues. You know, I'm sure you'll get a couple of gems. You always will. But the issue is if you're replacing If you're replacing a raft of existing senior players, first team players, and expecting all of these new players, all of them, to just kick on, it's a little bit of a flawed policy. You need some luck. You'll need some serious luck with that. But also, there is something that I mentioned on the show earlier on, and I want you to clarify whether this is a thing, first and foremost. I've got a bit of a fear. With West Ham at the moment, I don't think West Ham have got the pull that they had 12 months ago. I don't think we have, right? I don't think we're a threat. If we're competing for a player with Crystal Palace, with Brighton, with Aston Villa, with Nottingham Forest, and we both offer the same money, I think the players go into those clubs. So there is a player that we're linked with at the moment. There's a player called Malik Diouf from Prague. And we know that Atalanta, we know that Nottingham Forest, we know that Palace, really closely monitoring this player. Liverpool were looking at him as well, but they went and got Frimpong. So he's a good player, by all accounts. I don't know much about him, but he can't be shit. He's 20 years old, Senegalese. We're messing around, as we normally do, negotiating. We've had 2 offers turned down, and we're rumoured to be going back in with a third. I'm worried that West Ham are being used, because I've heard these stories before. We're being used by other clubs to do the negotiating. And then once the deal gets accepted, said agent of player may highlight that a certain deal has been accepted to other clubs. Basically, what I'm saying is I think that we might be in a situation in this window where not only players are going to sort of turn us down, I think other clubs could be using us to do the hard work, the hard miles, going out there negotiating for deals. Is that possible? Is that the type of thing that can happen?
That's not unique. That's not unique. It's a well-known machinery or trick in especially agents that don't have any real affinity or affiliation to a club or any real interest, and there lies the danger of, for example, the so-called super agents, because and we're not even talking about super agents, but certain agents really, their interest is to basically get as much as they can for their player and to basically pitch that player between clubs. In other
Yeah.
words, I know that I want my player to go to West Ham, yes,
Yeah.
but the reality is I will speak to every other club and get an offer so that effectively West Ham will have to pay more in order to get the player,
Yeah.
even though in the first place the player would have been intending to go to West Ham in the first place. But the agent's not going to tell you that.
No. And I
Yes,
suppose, like you
yes,
say, that's probably not. It's not just exclusive to football. That happens in all business. But
yes.
in football in particular, that type of thing does happen. And if you don't have those relationships, when I was going back and talking about a director of football, having that man that identifies a player and that can go out, like you said earlier on, that can go out to Botafogo, go out to Fluminense, knows the people, has that relationship, and you can basically have the confidence that this club won't try and stiff me. I'll negotiate something, but because of the relationship I've got with them, I know that they won't fuck me. I know that they won't go to other clubs and do this and do that. That's important, isn't it? To have someone that has got a bit of standing that can, because otherwise that's going to happen. You're going to work so hard for weeks and weeks and weeks to get a deal negotiated. All of a sudden, the agent of that player is going to go, right, yeah, the club have accepted 17 million over this terms. If you want him, put a bid in. Bosh, job done. If you haven't got that relationship with that agent or that club, then that's the type of thing that's going to happen.
Listen, if a club like your club is intending to build something which may not be immediate and have, for example, a 3 to 4 year plan, which I find impossible, because the manager, it's well known that the average lifespan of a manager at the moment is, if he's lucky, 24 months.
Yeah.
So the reality is, and this is why it's absolutely necessary to have the sporting director, which is involved. Well, to have the club having a sporting director, and the sporting director's purpose is completely different from the manager's purpose or
Yeah.
the manager's plans, because in reality, if the sporting director is going to build something that is going to be lasting, then he needs to work with agents that have like-mindedness and like mind and like interests for the club.
Yeah.
In other words, the agent that he's going to work with, or the agents that he's going to work with, are going to have to be ones that are going to work with him to build the club in terms of presenting to him players that really won't want to go anywhere else, because that agent will be able to sell the virtues of the plan that is in place, that is going to achieve the ambition of what the sporting director wants for the club, not what the manager wants for
Because
the
the
club.
plan is important as well, isn't it? It isn't just a case of going to, especially a top player. It ain't just a case of going, I represent West Ham. We're in the Premier League. They quite like you. You've got to surely lay down a roadmap and say, this is where we're going. This is what we're doing. This is what the manager's plans are. This is what we see for you. You've got to really, really kind of sell it to them. And my worry is, like I said, I've worked with yourself, and you're absolutely amazing. But to have, it's a very unique skill set, and I don't feel. Look, I don't know Macaulay, but we know he's not done that job before. He's an analyst, and as I understand it, I don't think he's doing that job anyway. I think the negotiation side of things or selling a dream, from what I'm being told, that's being done elsewhere in the club anyway. So Macaulay is identifying talent, from what I'm being told. He isn't actually doing the sporting director role, not really, or he's doing a watered down version, as we understand it. It's a very unique skill set, that, isn't it? And it's so important that a club have got it. And I think it's mad that in a situation that we're in, especially when you consider that they're saying that we are in financial struggles at the moment. If you're in financial struggles, then surely it's even more important that you are, with whatever money you've got, with whatever money you make from players, it is invested in the best possible way for the football club. Because you should be learning from your previous mistakes, shouldn't you? You should be, ideally.
The, the, the problem we have, and the problem that I've identified at your club, for example, is that one of the biggest problems that I've noticed is that your lack of strength in depth in recruitment.
Yeah.
I am a great believer that in any squad, there should be at least two similar style players for each position on the pitch.
Yeah.
I also believe that when you have limitation of finances, especially at the lower clubs and probably your club, one of the essential things that the recruitment person, whether it be a sporting director or just whatever his position is, he needs to be able to identify players with versatility.
Yeah.
In other words, you need to maximize the five, because as Stuart Pearce will tell you, the team is the team now is not about the 11 players that start the match. It's about the 16 players that are available to play in each match. Therefore, really, you need to be smart tactically to expand even the five players on the pitch, and even make those five players potentially 25
You
players.
said that before.
Or,
You said that before. If you've got
or
players, I think you
yes,
mentioned on the last show, you said about Yilmaz, who can play in a multitude of different positions. You used him as an example. If Yilmaz is on your bench,
absolutely.
he counts as about four players.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And to be honest with you, that's one of the kind of type of versatility that, for example, a Kudos brings.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because obviously he may not want to play in those positions, but he can play either wide left, wide right, or through the middle.
Yeah.
But what you do know that even if he's on your bench and you have a problem with your left side, he can make shift on your left side, or you have a problem with right side, or whatever it is. And so, really, when you have limited resources like a club like West Ham, your recruitment has to be able to identify players that can be, what's the word, flexible
Yeah.
and be able to be changed. I think West Ham buy players that are too specific.
Yeah.
Too specific for particular roles, and when those players are injured or whatever, there isn't the same quality substitute to make you not miss those players in their absence.
Look at how we used to struggle with Antonio, because Antonio is very unique, but we were so dependent on Antonio because he's like a one-man wrecking machine up front. But then what we would do is we'd go out and we'd buy Haller, but West Ham would try and play in the exact same way that we played when we had Antonio up front. But Haller's not Antonio. And it's like, if you're going to go out, if you're dead set on playing a certain system in a certain way, sure, Haller was obviously the wrong player. We should have been identifying a different type of player. Haller wasn't bad; he's a good player, but they're do you know what I mean? And you're exactly right. If you look at the different assortment of strikers that we had, you had a Danny Ings, you had a Fulkrug, we had Antonio last year. They're all different, even down to some of our targets now. They're identifying that the left back is an issue. So I'm assuming Emerson's going to go. So they're assuming that left back is an issue. So we're looking at the Senegalese lad who's 6 foot. He's quick. He's got a decent delivery. He's all right going forward. Not good defensively. But then we're also looking at, if that fails, we're going for Leif Davis of Ipswich. They're different. They're almost like they're different players to a degree. So I always find that strange, where when you look at the targets that we're looking at for certain areas of the pitch, all the players are different. And you think, surely you must have an idea of profile fucking player that you want. Do you know what I mean?
Well, you've just hit the nail on the head in my view. If you are if you're going to build a certain type of house, you need to know specifically what type of brick you need to build that house.
Yeah.
And when you identify the type of brick to build that house, the problem then becomes where you're going to source that brick from. But you don't keep changing the brick because you can't find the source.
No.
Yes. So, okay. Sorry, my analogies are a bit weird. Okay. You just, yeah, because in the end, you might end up with a board house.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Because in the end, if you are going to keep changing the essential core material that you want, then in fact, really, you haven't really identified what you really want.
No. It's with West Ham, they want a brick built house, and we end up living in a garden shed. That's what it seems like to me. It's just frustrating. What we have got, because I want to get to these, I've highlighted 8 questions. Now I know you might not be able to answer them all, so I've just 8 questions. We'll whiz through them. You're not going to answer this one, all right? But I'm gonna say it anyway. Red 5 says, how can we force Potter out of this club before he sells Paqueta or Kudus and relegates us? I know you're not going to answer that. Hammers Mikey says, I suppose this is a bit of a wider issue.
Hold on. Sorry. Can you repeat the first question?
He said, how can we force Potter out of this club before he sells Paqueta and Kudus and relegates us? I said, I'm not expecting you to answer that.
The question is, do you have a choice?
At the moment?
Yes. Do you have a choice of, bearing in mind the potential or very imminent threat of PSR? What other assets do you have that could possibly bring you the income in order to alleviate any threat of being breaching PSR, other than to consider selling, irrespective of how many players Potter may want to have out? In reality, you can only sell what somebody wants.
There is a solution, and the club have already come out and said it. So because it's looking like we're struggling to sell players, the club have come out via Claret and Hugh and said that they will inject money into the club, because within PSR rules, legally, which is something that West Ham never do, you over a 3-year period, the club can inject £95 million over a 3-year period. We don't do it; other clubs do. They haven't done that, so there is room for West Ham to inject that money that Kudus and Paqueta would get us. They can do that.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you the converse question. to the question that you have asked.
Yeah.
Let's assume that your owner or an investor can invest that money that you're saying is possible to be injected.
It absolutely is possible, by the way. It is.
Okay, right. Now, I haven't checked that out. So one thing I don't talk is in a subject I'm not qualified to talk about. So
Yeah.
until I've done my research on that, I won't say yeah or nay on that. You may be correct. But let me put it this way. You're also at danger when you have the likes of Paqueta and play and Kudus. You're also at danger of them also looking to see what quality of players are coming in because they have ambition to achieve things themselves. So the decision as to whether the players want to go or not may not be totally dependent on the PSR status of the club or what the manager wants, but it may also be down to the ambition of the players that are already there who sees themselves as potential Champions League players. And we know, for example, that Kudus has come from a club that was in the Champions League. And we know that Paqueta and players of that ilk wanted to go even before his problems to the likes of Manchester City. And so, really, unless they see that the kind of players that are coming in are going to complement them in order to have a chance of not going through the same situation of being at threat of being relegated last year or not achieving anything, they might also be the one.
They don't want to be relegation fodder every year, do they? They don't want to be.
Absolutely, because the reality is this. Ultimately, we see Harry Kane having to leave Tottenham, and he must have broken his heart because he's a Tottenham boy, even though you don't want to talk about Tottenham as a West Ham fan.
No.
But the reality is, he must have
I think it's the
broken his heart to have to go
best
to.
move of his life. That
Yeah,
was.
yeah, absolutely. So the players really, after uh, I happen to know, for example, that there are riches that could be offered to the likes of Kudos elsewhere. That if it was solely money that motivates
I
him,
know.
he would have gone there.
You're talking.
So the point is,
You're talking about the Saudi money, and do you know what? And this is to his credit, right? Because a lot of fans, and I don't know why. This actually really irritates me with the West Ham fans. They take likings to some players and dislikings to others. Kudus is a player that really splits the fan base 50-50, I'd say. Half the fan base absolutely adore him. Half of them misread him. They think he's moody. They think he's sulky. I think it's just his demeanour. It's just how certain players are. And for me, I think when you talk about mercenaries, well, mercenaries are players that will go over to somewhere like Saudi to a degree. Maybe not mercenary, but they're players that really, because the money you get paid out there, tax-free, is ridiculous. He's been offered that, and he doesn't want it. He wants to stay in the Premier League because I think he cares more about his career and what he can win and playing at the highest level. And I think that's to be commended. I think that's to be commended from the player.
to be honest with you, I happen to be able to be qualified to confirm that. I've had the opportunity to speak to the player myself.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, really, money is not what drives him.
There you go. I love the player. I absolutely love him. I know he can be moody, but I think he's pissed off. I think that's what when I see Kudus on the pitch and people think he's sulking. He ain't sulking. I'm thinking he looks pissed off. He looks angry.
Let me ask you a question.
Go on.
Well, is Lionel Messi moody?
Yeah, of course he is.
Is Mbappe moody?
Ronaldo?
Is Ronaldo moody?
Yeah.
Was Ian Wright moody?
Yep.
Yes. Any player that wants to achieve things and things are not going well because of their care and their ambition, they're going to be moody.
This is a thing. Just one second. This is a thing because I'm having this running battle with a lot of West Ham fans at the moment, and unfortunately, I just feel like sometimes West Ham fans are not used to this level of player. I mean, to be honest, you can go back to Dimitri Payet and his final season. He was moody as fuck. These top players do get moody. He might have been moody for different reasons. I don't know, but they because they've got such high levels themselves. To get to the level in the game that they're at, it's through ambition. It's because of what they want to win.
If you know how some of these players even cry, they might not show it, even cry, and their whole weekend can be destroyed by a bad result, you'll be amazed.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people think football players are only about money. After a player has achieved a certain level of money, that becomes secondary.
Yeah.
He then wants to be. He then wants to contribute. He wants to be. He wants to be fully aware of what his requirements are. When a player is put on the pitch, and this week this is expected of him, and not even next week, but the next game in the same week, something else is expected of him, then he becomes moody. It's not even moody. Moody is not the right word.
No.
He becomes frustrated, and
Yeah.
that frustration manifests itself into some kind of superficial or apparent visual behavior that appears to be mood, but it isn't. It's the willingness and the drive of the player to want to succeed that he's not able to achieve that success or being able to carry out his intentions or what he
Well,
intends to do on the pitch because things are
well,
not
well,
going
well,
well
uh,
for
well,
him.
uh, well, like I said, what I see when I see Kudus, I see a pissed off player. And I don't think he's pissed off because he doesn't want to be at West Ham. I think he's pissed off because don't get me wrong, right? Look, players always want to play at the very top. But if West Ham had have stayed true to their word of whatever was sold to Kudus, because we bought him from a Champions League club when we was in Europe, and I'm assuming he was sold the dream. If we'd have stayed true to that path and we'd have been doing well ourselves, we wouldn't be seeing a very pissed off player at the moment. And
Can I tell you something?
go
Can I
on,
tell you something?
go on.
Nothing gets a player more pissed off, for want of a better word, please excuse me, fans. Nothing get than to know that the decisions of a manager has been so inept
Yeah,
that it has led to losing a match from a winning position or a draw position.
we've seen plenty of that. I know.
I would like to tell you that some players are very disenchanted by the by manager's decision, which has led to a win being turned into a draw or a draw being turned in a loss because of decisions that are made in probably even taking off that player that was doing well at the time when they were drawing or winning, which ended up in a loss or a draw when they're taken off the pitch.
That happened to me when I was managing my son's team. I've done it before. I've ma- I've made a change in a game. These are 15-year-old kids. They're competing. They're all out on the pitch. They're kicking lumps out of each other. They're competitive. If I make a change and that change goes back, I get grilled afterwards. What'd you do that for? Would you fucking take that player off? Would you do this? So there's no way that doesn't happen in the professional game. Of course it does. It must do.
And there lies a reason also why you need the independence of the sporting director,
Yeah.
because the sporting director doesn't necessarily need to have, what would I say, um, titles. The sporting director doesn't necessarily have to have shown that he won the Champions League as a player, or he has achieved winning a league as a player in order to get the job. He just needs to show, for example, that he's capable of recruiting the right player
Yeah.
and basically putting together the right management team and coaching team in order to achieve things on the pitch. And so here comes the problem, because when the manager is the person that picks the players, then in effect, really, what happens is that he he only picks the players that can carry out his instructions,
Yeah. Of course. And
and
this
and
this
if those
fuck. I'll go on.
and if
Carry
those
on. Sorry.
those instructions are not working, then really the players, because they see the managers also almost being the ones who gave them the opportunity, tend not to contest the decisions that are made by the manager.
They're subservient. Subservient. They haven't got their own
Yes,
standards. Now let me give you. I'm going to give you three words.
no, but
James,
before you
go
say,
on. Go
I
on.
want to say before you say, because it's very crucial that if West Ham wants to move forward, it needs to have an independent sporting director, and I'll tell you why. The sporting director is going to bring, with the resources it has, the best players that it can bring in. The manager sometimes especially a manager that has not achieved anything, is very cautious of the kind of caliber of players that he brings in, because he doesn't want to bring in any player that has achieved more than he has in the game, because the manager doesn't want a position whereby he brings a player who is an established player and a player of credentials in terms of winning titles
I've said
and
this as well.
trophies. Yes. Then he comes in half time, the team is losing. A playoff that is going to be quite significant in what happens in the second half. Sometimes just the team comes out and the team plays far better because you think that the manager has given them a kick up the arse. No, it's another player that has given the rest of the team a kick up the arse.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm not here to lose. I don't want to lose. I'm here to win things. We need to go out there and do it. Sometimes we think it's the manager that is actually orchestrating the better performance in the second half, but it's actually the influential players and the players of ambitions that is achieving that. Therefore, when the sporting director buys a player, the sporting director is not actually facing the wrath of that player in the dressing room at halftime. But if the manager buys the player, yes, he is going to make sure that the players that he's going to bring in are not ones that are likely to even think about arguing with him.
Challenging him. So like I said, I made a prediction when Potter came in. I said, with the players that we've got, and you can call them egos because big players have got big egos. Alvarez, Paqueta, Kudus. Those three, let's just concentrate on those three. You can add Fulkrug to that as well because he's definitely got an ego, that geezer. But they've all got standards. Don't forget, before Fulkrug came here, whether you rate him or not, he was playing in the Champions League final before he came to us. He's got standards. He's a German international. They've all got their own mindsets. They're competitive. I said Potter is going to have to downgrade this squad to get anything out of it because I don't think the players fit the manager. That is what I predicted. And when you look at the players that we're currently linked with and the players that are on that transfer list, well, not on a transfer list, but they're available, that's exactly what they're doing. It's almost like we've got a manager that doesn't have, like you said, the credentials that can really challenge a Kudus or a Paqueta or a Fulkrug. Probably can't challenge him. They'll probably look at him and go, what the fucking hell are you talking about? You made a mistake. That's your fault. And I just don't... I feel like that's a massive problem for him.
I do happen to know that this is a problem.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's move on to the next question.
We'll move on to the next question. So, but like you were saying there, where they go for, I'm going to bring up another question now. So this is Rob J Nathan, great singing voice by the way, better voice than yours, X. So I've been told. Great singing voice. So he says, will we have to pay to get rid of James Ward-Prowse? Now, this is another one of those subservient players that, for large portions of last season, towards the end, we've got Edson Alvarez, who I know he's lost his head, right? He's not the same player at the moment. He really isn't. You was having Potter playing James Ward-Prowse in the CDM, and you was having Alvarez as like a dog's body, like a number 8. What is that all about? Because there's no comparison. If you want a CDM destroyer, Alvarez is your man. He's a good CDM. I'm not saying he's great or he's world class, but he's good. If he's got the right people around him and the balance in midfield is right, Alvarez is good. How the fuck can James Ward-Prowse be played in Alvarez's position, and is Alvarez going to be happy about that?
You see, one of the biggest way you can actually alienate a player and lead to the player's downfall or even his desire or enthusiasm to even perform is to be seen to be disrespected.
Yeah.
If the player, number one, when a club is going to, any player of any caliber, when you're going to try to sign them, the agent has a job to try and persuade them why it's going to be advantageous for that player to go to a particular club.
Yeah.
For example, let's go to for example Duran. one of
Please,
the
it makes me want to cry.
basic one of the basic criterion when Duran was considering coming to West Ham was the fact that he knew that there was no challenge to his position, so he was almost already made number 9
Yep.
and didn't have any real competition. When you're bringing in the likes of Alvarez and players, they will want to know, yes, I want to see that there's a quality player that can help the team if I'm injured or whatever, but he wants to know that he is going to be number 1. If if he sees that the manager puts him on the pitch and the player that he doesn't even consider to be better than him is then put in front of him and taking his position as number 1, believe me, he does not take that very
No,
welcomely.
no, it's not good.
Yes,
It's of course they're not going to. And for those
yeah,
in the chat that are sort of, because I know it's a question that it's probably another show on, if you was in a fantasy world, you've been installed as a director of football at West Ham. You look at the current squad. What do you do? What sort of players do you go out and sign? That's probably a different show in itself. But to give you an example, I'm not saying you directly, but Sports X. If you want to know the type of players that we would be bringing in, then it would have been the likes of Duran, and it wouldn't have been at 60 million, 65 million, nowhere near it. It would have been getting him in at the right time. That's the type of player that we would be looking at when you're not working with super agents and you're working with people that are going out there looking at the needs of a club, what the club needs, and going out there and working, building relationships with Aston Villa at the time, with that player, and convincing them that this is the right move for them. The player was so sure he was coming to West Ham. He did the crossed hammers on social media. He was so sure he was coming.
let me ask you a question. We go back to, first and foremost, identifying what you want and make sure that if you have in identifying what you want, if the player has the characteristics, a certain type of characteristic.
Yeah.
So even if you miss your target A with those characteristics, your target B must have maybe not the same quality of characteristics, but similar characteristics. Your target C,
your pronunciation of characteristics is terrible, by the way. But go on.
Well, never mind. It's my Jamaican background. Okay, characteristics. Okay,
Yeah, go on.
right. Now, the reality is, if we or if the club was interested in getting, for example, Duran, how did the club end up with Fulkrug?
Exactly. Well, I've got no fucking clue how you can go from one to the other. This goes back to what I'm talking about with the left backs now. This has been going on for years. How you can have such different profiles of player. Especially if the manager's involved. Especially if the manager is involved in saying, I want this player. You would imagine they'd be saying, well, he's got to be big, he's got to be quick, he's got to be good in the air, he's got to be something, a similar profile. But to go from, look, Fulkrug ain't shit. He's not. He's a decent target man. But him and Duran were vastly different. Vastly different.
Hold on a minute. Who plays football? Not even David Moyes before he left didn't play with a target man.
No.
No. So let me ask you a question. And should I say something? For example, James Ward-Prowse, for example, was brought in because he's supposed to be some specialist in set ball.
Still hasn't equaled David Beckham's record, by the way. Still hasn't equaled it.
Yeah,
He's been...
but hold on. But even though he was brought in because he was supposed to be a set piece specialist, we didn't create any opportunities for set pieces.
Don't know.
Yes. Now, the truth is really West Ham, and the way I hear and see, the way I hear about, I even saw him trying to play at Brighton. There has to be a certain type of mobile striker that is able to occupy in and around the 18-yard box with the mobility to change direction and to basically benefit from any build-up play in the 18-yard box without relying on the old-fashioned type of striker.
Absolutely.
One of the greatest things about Duran is that Duran, for example, had the capability to be effective in and outside the 6-yard, the 12-yard, the 18-yard box, and even deeper into midfield.
Right foot,
One
left
of the
foot.
greatest, absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the greatest things about him as well was his quickness of thought. So, in other words, really, and one of the greatest things about him was also is his deceptive, very limited backlift.
Yeah.
So you don't actually
Some
see
some
as a
some some
defender.
of some of his shots, snapshots, bang, and they were like
Absolutely,
rockets, absolute rockets. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So as a defender, you don't have the time to compensate because you can't see what he's going to do before he do it.
No.
The truth is, really, when I look at Fulkrug, no disrespect, really, I see a normal player that any proficient defender should be able to stop to a greater degree than stopping, for example, the likes of a Colomundo, the likes of Amiga, the likes of Lautaro Martinez, the likes of an Osimhen. Those kind of players, really, you have to be really on your game to stop them from scoring a goal.
Yeah.
Other play,
One day, people, I'm gonna convince X to run through the list of players that West Ham could have had. It'd be the most depressing show you've ever seen. But if you even had the half the chance to know some of the players that we could have had, it's shocking. Duran's
well, I'm telling
just the latest.
I'm telling you guys, one of the biggest problems that not just West Ham but many clubs have in England in particular. Uh, when we look at, for example, a sporting director who is probably the most highly rated sporting director um, in the world football right now, and believe it or not, is a sporting director that really wants to come to it. Well, I shouldn't say that because he's in a job, and but it's a
Yeah.
yeah, but the most successful sporting director right now, both in recruitment of players and the off-field financial transactional activities in terms of increasing values of players and making money on off the pitch, is a sporting director by the name of Rui Braz of Benfica.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly who you mean.
Okay? Right?
Yeah.
And Rui Braz, for example, I don't know if you know, before the arrival.
Isn't he a bit of a hard ass? So he doesn't take any shit, does he?
Well, this is exactly why a club should have the likes of Rui Braz of the sporting director, because his job is not to suck up to the owner.
Yeah.
His job is not to suck up to anybody. His job is to make sure that the club has the best playing personnel and the best type of recruitment of players, to the extent where each time he can replace, a bit like Brighton is trying to do at the moment. Brighton can replace like for like, like for like, like for like. And that's why, for example, Brighton is amongst the three.
Yeah, I think you told me a few weeks ago that Brighton are probably one of the healthiest clubs at the moment in terms of they're comfortable, they can command what they want for a player if somebody wants to buy them, because they're not in any issue because of the way they've been run.
Brighton don't need to sell anybody.
No.
Brighton buys Moises Caicedo for less than 10 million and sell him for 100 million.
Yeah.
Rui Braz buys Enzo Fernandez for less than 10 million and sell him for 100 million.
Was that after we turned Caicedo down by any chance?
I prefer not to delve into to that. You know, to be honest with you, you've been trying to bring me into controversy all the time because you're a fan of West Ham.
Oh no,
but
I'll behave. I'll stop it. Sorry.
My job is to try and to educate the fans to understand that the fans have a voice and that we have the medium through somewhere like yourself to be able to let that voice be heard. And in order to let that voice be heard, the fans need to be informed and educated on the rudimentaries of what happens in the club and in the transfer business and how it affects the success or lack of success that they're experiencing at the club. Now, the reality is that when you have, for example, Rui Braz, his job, his success is not just in terms of um, getting a good playing style on the pitch, but his job is also to put the club in a position where the club is never at financial risk, because the business as it's done off the field makes the club financially self-sustainable.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's it's mind-boggling that
When the,
we're not doing that now. This is, I know it's going back
no,
to,
so listen,
that's
so
mad.
here comes the problem now. When the club is in a position that is not in the same uh, situation as, for example, Brighton, that's a very big danger. Because unfortunately, one of the things that PSR has done is that PSR has enabled every club to understand the financials of every other club.
Yeah,
Therefore, what happens now is that whereas in the past you could keep your finances pretty secret, and even though you're struggling, you could tell a club you want £100 million for example, Rice. The reality is, when the club knows that you're in danger and you need to sell because they have access to your information, they now start assessing those financials and saying, "Well, listen, he says he wants £60 million for player Y, but we know that if we hang out for another week or so, we can get him for 40 million."
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the reality
So,
is
so,
that
so, so, what you're saying is that West Ham didn't need to broadcast that they were skint because everyone could see it anyway.
every single club right now in Europe don't need to broadcast whether they're skint or in a financially strong position, because everybody has access, a bit like going to company's house and looking at the balance sheet of every company.
Fucking hell. Okay. So that must just be. I think that those messages that are coming out from this is a different conversation. I think the messages that are coming out from the club, I think that's more aimed at the fans to kind of try and realign their expectations. Because obviously we've been used to getting in the Caduces, the Paquetas, the Scamacas, the Halers, the big players. And I think they've been hammering home that message, not because they're trying to get, like you've just said there, the other clubs know. It isn't for the clubs, it isn't for the clubs or the buying clubs' benefit. I think it is for the fans. I think they're saying we're fucked. You know, we you need to. We're not going to be doing much in this window. I think it's for that. But going on to something else, I don't know whether you want to do that on another show. Is that too big a piece? Were you talking about media and and the way that not talking about mainstream media, but maybe talking about people
Well,
like
both.
yeah, but
Well,
talking
both. Well,
talking
both.
about media and the way that they use the media to look, they do to manipulate the fans, to build hype, to lower expectations, to do everything else.
Well, unfortunately, media is nothing without news,
No,
and media is nothing without controversy.
no,
Nobody wants to hear a good story that Nick is a very kind person, and Nick
which I am.
has a charity.
Yeah,
Nick has a charity that looks after all the homeless people, or whatever. What everybody wants to know is that Nick is the kind of person that would steal the money from the guy on the street from the box that he's got the pound coins in. Yes,
yeah.
right? Okay.
I told you that
So
in
the
confidence, by
reality,
the way. That's out of order. Go on.
yeah.
Yeah.
So so the reality is this, that because the media needs news, the media also finds itself in a compromise where it has to carry out the narrative of the people who's providing them with the news.
Yeah.
So therefore, certain media may not be independent of the source of the news that they're carrying, because they're used as the vehicle from the source of the news they're carrying. I don't know. I think that maybe I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say there. What I'm trying to say is that certain clubs and owners will align themselves with certain media because it helps them to carry out the story that they want to narrate.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, I mean, we see that. We see that with our club, not just through their relationships with certain people. People that I know that you know as well. Jim White at Talksport, and uh, well, it looks like You know, following Tim, I think now Sullivan's got a relationship with Romano now, because quite a lot of stories are being leaked through Romano. But not just those ones, like the mainstream ones. For West Ham, the main problem is for us is our own internal news sources. So the ones that focus solely on a West Ham crowd, which is what we kind of feed off of. They do absolutely pull the strings of those people, 100%. They literally manipulate the narrative of the majority of the mainstream story that's out there, and there's nothing you can do, because you know there's nothing you can do. And look, I'm not blaming the people that do it. I'm not. You know, a lot of them say, well, it isn't Sullivan calling us. A lot of them will say, I'm not going to name names, but they'll say, we just check with the senior source and we ask them. But then obviously you're opening the fucking door, and then he's going to give you the message that he wants parroted out. He knows that conversation is going to happen once a week, and that is literally just they have the fan base on strings. They really do.
Listen, the clubs and the owners need the media, and the media needs the owners and the club.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, without content, most of this media, without content, they don't get any subscriptions. Without content, they don't make any money. So the fact is, really, they're also not going to say anything that is likely to, for want of a word, distance themselves from the source that wants them to carry out the narrative that they want.
You don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know, and that's the issue. Once you've got in bed and you're in the pocket of these people, that's it. You know, there's no going back. Which is something that I'm proud of, the fact that you know we never do that. I'm completely independent. I'm like the director of football. We don't align ourselves with anyone. We talk to independent people, which is the way it should be. You know, we're just fans at the end of the day. And I think, like you said at the start of the show, it's getting that sort of it's education for people, because people are confused. They are frustrated. They are. Not only are West Ham fans, for instance, you know, suffering with the loss of Upton Park, which is a big deal to West Ham fans. It's huge. But because of how it's gone, it makes it even worse. And so many people are walking away. The stats came out, it was about 3 months ago, that in the time that we've moved into that London stadium, almost the capacity of Upton Park of now, but they don't go to the London Stadium anymore. So it's almost 30,000 people that signed up on day one of that London Stadium. They don't go anymore. So that's the amount of people that have walked away. And I think that's shocking. And you can't keep on churning and getting new people in. We know that they're struggling to sell tickets now. They absolutely are. I've been talking to fans constantly. They kind of they've been begging people for the last week or so, which they've never done before. People that were on the season ticket waiting list that have never had phone calls. They've been absolutely battered relentlessly for about 2 weeks. People that just joined it straight away, they're getting phone calls. Do you want a ticket? You can have up to 4. So it's almost like they've pushed the fan base to a stage where a lot of fans they've walked away this year. We're never going to know the exact number, because the club are not going to disclose that yet, because they want to sell more tickets. So supply and demand. You pretend that the supply is smaller so that you know there's more demand for it. But I do think that there's going to be a bit of a shock next season with the amount of people that we get in that place, because it's miserable over there. As a fan, you've said before, the job of a club, in my opinion, you know, if you're a fan, you pay, especially nowadays with the way the economy is, people are struggling. If you pay your hard-earned money, football's supposed to be a release. You take your kids over there, you want to have fun, you want to be entertained. And it's been, I can't even tell you how bad it is over there for the average West Ham fan that sits in the stands. You know, you're surrounded by tourists. You know, it's been gentrified, diluted. A lot of the original fans are gone. So that side of it, the match going experience in terms of having that kind of family feel that you used to have at Upton Park, that's gone, completely gone.
But like I said, you know, you as a West Ham fan, and you know, credit to you. But in general, really, I have noticed that there's a serious decline in the actual quality of players, not just in West Ham, not just the Premier League,
This is what I'm saying.
but through
Entertainment.
all leagues. I mean, when you can imagine that essentially Lionel Messi, who is almost about to have his pension, and Cristiano Ronaldo is able to get one of the biggest contracts, maybe for also commercial reasons, but they're still deemed probably the two best players in the world. It's maybe disputedly. It does go to show that we're not producing any top players at this moment in time. Where are the Zinedine Zidanes?
Yeah, but it's not so much the players. I think it's also the system-based managers. We spoke about this on the last show. So you can get a Jack Grealish from Aston Villa, give him to Pep Guardiola. All of a sudden, he's been shackled to shit to a position where he's got to be part of a system. The eccentricity, if that's even a word, the flair and everything that made him great at Villa, that's gone. It's gone. That fun player is gone. I think these system-based players, we saw it with Kudus under Lopetegui. We know for a fact that Kudus was having running battles with Lopetegui because he used to carry the ball too much and take too many risks, and Lope didn't like it. So he tried to sort of restrict him doing that, tried to get him to drop deeper and do less of what he was actually good at. So I don't think it's maybe talent. I think it's
hold on.
Go
on. Hold on. Can you imagine buying Mbappe and telling him not to run with the ball?
Yeah, this is what I mean. It's fucking bizarre.
Can you imagine buying Vinicius Jr. and telling him not to run with the ball? Can you imagine buying any Wayne Rooney when Rooney was in his prime and telling him not to run with the ball?
Absolutely not.
The whole purpose of bringing in a Payet or Kudus or Mbappe or Lionel Messi is to run with the ball.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you're going to run with the ball, you're also susceptible to it being taken away from you. So, really, while you can damage a position when you're running with the ball, there's also a risk that you could lose the ball and the opposition can damage you.
But we said before, didn't we? But we said before, do you know when we were talking about this system-based managers and system-based football where it's so fucking, it's like chess. If you go back to the likes of Harry Redknapp, say for instance, right, let me just 2 seconds. I'm going to read this team out to you very quickly, right? And you tell me whether Harry Redknapp would be able to get a tune out of this team. Now, we've got Wan-Bissaka at right back. We've got Emerson at left back. Areola in goal. You've got whatever choice of Aguerd, Todibo, Mavropanos and Kilman that you want at the back as a back two. You've got Alvarez as a sole CDM. You've got a dual pivot in the middle of Paqueta and Kudus. Kudus is your pace and your ball carrier. Paqueta is your magic man who can pick a pass. You've got someone like a Somerville or a Guillermo left wing. You've got Bowen right wing. And at the moment, you've got Fulkrug up front. Do you not think that somebody like Harry Redknapp would be able to get a tune out of that fucking team?
No, he'd be able to get an album.
Exactly.
A hit album.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The point is really, and this is the problem, West Ham have always had good players.
Yeah.
I still can't believe to this day that West Ham haven't been able to get a good tune out of Felipe Anderson. I still can't believe that West Ham have not been able to get a good tune out of Haller, because Haller is a very versatile player.
He was a top player. He really was a good player.
Yes. So the reality is something is wrong at the helm. And I believe if we're going to talk about a player not being able to express himself, when the whole purpose of buying him in the first place was because you saw him expressing himself, i.e. in Kudus, the onus has to be on compensating for his lackings.
Yeah.
Every player, yes. So if you know that Kudus is the kind of person that is going to take the ball and there's a risk he's going to lose it, you have to set your team in such a way that when you lose the ball, this is who is going to get it back for you. This is the kind. Let me put it this way.
This happened just very quickly. This happened when we had Slaven Bilic, who was very. I'm not saying he was Redknapp, but what Slaven Bilic was, he was the same type of manager in a sense that when he had Payet, he basically, you could see that with Payet, he went, just fucking go out and play. That's
There is
literally
a
what
reason.
that's what he said to him. Just go out and play. And all of the other teams around him, you had your Mark Nobles, even Lanzini. They were, for large portions of the game, they were mopping up after Payet because he would sometimes lose a ball. He would do this, but Payet was allowed to do what the fuck he wanted.
And you will normally notice that when Payet goes, Lanzini used to go behind him.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, really, what you had was a two-prong, maybe to a lesser extent, Lanzini in terms of taking the ball. But what would happen? You would have a player that takes the ball and lose it, and then you then have the threat of another person collecting it and being able to do almost the same as Payet can do with the ball.
Yeah,
Then
absolutely.
Lanzini loses the ball and it gets back to Payet, and Payet then creates the same impetus that he started.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. And that's the thing. And that's football for me has always been brave. So if you go back to, I suppose, what created football, because it was created in England, it was created for the working classes. West Ham was in Thames Ironworks. It was a work team. And what that was, people had shit lives, and then football was a release. It was a release for people. And what they expected from both teams, literally, you had 11 men versus 11 men going at each other. That was it. It wasn't too much tactical, and I understand that everything evolves and it gets. But if you go back to that period under Redknapp, or if you just go back to 15-16, there was nothing amazing tactically with that with what Bilic was doing. He just had a good team that believed in themselves, that was encouraged to fucking express themselves. They had a world-class player that was allowed to sort of do what the fuck he wanted, and it just
But
worked.
why did Bilic absolutely show those those characteristics? Because Bilic played under Harry Redknapp.
This is true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. You would expect, for example, if Alan Devonshire, for example, was the manager of West Ham, that would manifest itself in the way West Ham would play, because that's how he was taught to play.
Yeah. This is we've got a comment here from Charlie Irons, and that's the whole idea of this, Charlie. He says a great bit of education going on in this video. Credit to you and X. And this is the thing. This is what I'm keen to do, because you know, this is where I get frustrated, because I'm not saying I'm an expert by any means, but I've certainly got more insight now than what I used to have because of the people that I talk to. So I'm keen to, because I get frustrated when I feel like sometimes fans are not getting what I'm getting, but maybe you're not getting as much exposure to some of the side of football that I'm seeing. So that the idea of this is that hopefully, you know, it'll open your eyes a little bit and give you a little bit more of an insight into the way things work. But no, it's been good tonight. Shall we rattle through the last few questions, because my phone's about to go as well.
Yes.
So right, here's a good one here. No, not that one. I'm gonna go to that one as well. Right, Flynn Sayer says, does X think getting rid of Kudus and Paqueta is a good move? And if he does, who would he replace him with, of value but also quality? So I think this comes down to the structure in the club. But what he's saying is, is it the right thing at the moment for West Ham to get rid of Kudus and Paqueta? But what sort of players do you replace them with? Because they're pivotal to West Ham. They are.
Okay, so that's a very, very good question. And I'm going to answer that question by saying the most important thing about the club is the club. The most important of anything in the club. And let me go back to say as well, the first thing we have to look out for is the interest of the club. If it's essential for the club to be self-sustainable and not to be totally reliant on the injection of capital from its owners, then the club has to have a machinery that facilitates year on year the introduction of players of the caliber, for example, Kudus or Paqueta,
Yeah.
but has the ability to know that even when they're replaced, there is a conveyor belt of similar players being identified well before anybody
Should
even
should
comes for them or
should
they have to leave.
should those players even already be at the club? If you
Those players,
if you're well run, if you've got Kudus and Paqueta, and should you not be in a position where by the time that you sell them, not only have you already identified their replacements, but where possible, they're already in your club, in your squad.
well, like I told you, I happen to be quite close friends with but not one of with currently the best sporting director in the business.
Yeah,
Is the sporting director of Benfica.
yeah,
If you noticed before he arrived at Benfica, the club was in financial turmoil on the brink of bankruptcy. And he is coming now and he has spent £200 million on players and he sold them for collectively £700 million, which means he's created equity in the club of £500 million.
yeah.
Okay, now if we look at the same thing, it's a similar story at Brighton. That is why Brighton is not a threat of having to sell any players and can sell players for the price they want rather than the price they're forced to sell them at. Right now, the reality is that no player is indispensable. No player. For
No,
every kudos that you
I
can,
get that, I get that.
for every kudos that you can find, yes, there is another like kudos somewhere else. This is where the problem lies because unless the sporting director has integrity, credibility, and is not partial to any one so-called super agent or agent, and is prepared to spread his net far and wide and to capture as many fish in terms of players as possible from as many different seas, then really you have a problem whereby you cannot get the same caliber. You cannot get a replacement for Payet like Payet. You can't get a replacement for Kudos like Kudos, or a player for
Declan Rice as well. That was a big one.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So the point is this: in terms, if it is a necessity for the club to sell Kudos, and I don't know if it is, I think it may be, but if it is a necessity, and we know that because of I believe that Paqueta, for example, has not performed to his level, and he's only human. If you have the
He's
news
been through
around you,
he's been through so much, and I'm proud of the way that he's dealt with what he's been dealing with, guilty or innocent. Right,
absolutely.
I think he's dealt with it really well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that shows strength. But what I want to say is that you shouldn't have to worry about losing any player, including Bowen. You should have a machinery that already identified. When Rui Bras knows he's going to lose, for example, Darwin Nunes, he already has a Darwin Nunes in mind. Yeah?
Well,
For example,
can I ask you something? If you're going to be a selling club, as West Ham are now saying that they're going to be, it looks that way. Oh, hang on, I need to phone him back. Can't have that. Hello, mate. Sorry, I lost you. Yeah.
you need to sell. Yes.
So what I was going to say, if you're going to be a selling club, as it appears we're now going to be, should you be looking at selling a 24, 25-year-old Kudus? And I'm not saying I want this, by the way, but if you're going to be a selling club, should you not be looking at selling a 28, 29-year-old Bowen at the peak of his value?
What is a selling club?
A club that basically sells their best players to their rivals. I mean, it's looking like I've seen comments in the thread. This is going to really make me lose my fucking mind. But apparently, Ornstein from The Athletic is reporting that Tottenham have submitted a bid. I don't know whether it's been accepted, but apparently they have. So for West Ham, in the situation that we are in, where, I know Spurs are in the Champions League next year, but they finished below us in the league. For us, to sell somebody like Kudus to Tottenham is unacceptable. It really fucking is. They're our nearest and most hated rivals as a football club. For us to be doing that is going to hurt. It's hurt with Declan Rice to Arsenal. To do the same with Kudus to Spurs is almost unforgivable. So what I'm saying is that not what they're saying? It's a necessity. Probably the player you could get more for is a Bowen. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying sell Bowen. But if you're going to be a selling club, then what you do is you sell your 28, 29-year-old player when you can get 80 million for him, 90 million for him. Because he's only going to go down in value.
That may be a risk too far for for the owners of the club. Uh, Bowen has almost become like an adopted son of West Ham.
Absolutely. But what I'm saying is, are you going to be if you're going to be a selling club, be a selling club.
I understand. And to be honest with you, really, you ask the next question. Should West Ham be selling Kudus? Should West Ham be selling Paqueta? That's not a question for me to answer. But I do know that if they're going to sell them, then they need to replace them with players that are going to enhance the team and probably even bring qualities that are better as a team for in terms of teamwork for the team.
Yeah.
So to be honest with you, really, I'm going to put it out there now, and and look, the kind of players that I've scouted and would fully recommend is the likes of Richard Rios of Palmeiras,
Yeah.
Colombian.
Yeah,
Yes?
absolutely.
Yeah.
This goes back to something that Troja was saying earlier in the chat, because he's been reported. Look, we've been linked with him for 4 windows now, and I know that you've been. I know that you kind of we have been. But in
Yes.
this window, it's been confirmed from the senior source via X, who is kind of the main ITK in the West Ham world. That basically they've said that we are not interested in Rios in this window. We have in previous, and it's Inter Milan that are close to getting him. And to answer you, Troj, I'd be over the fucking moon if we got Rios. He's exactly the type of player that I like. But you know what else? Troj is a player that doesn't like players that get yellow cards. He gets yellow cards. He does. But he would be amazing for West Ham. He's got that energy. He's got mobility. He's got everything. He would give us that dynamism in central midfield. But do you know where he wouldn't fit, though? And I'm telling you why he wouldn't fit. The main reason why Alvarez has been shunted out of CDM and James Ward-Prowse has replaced him is because James Ward-Prowse is subservient to Potter, and he puts the brakes on in midfield. So when the ball gets played out from defence, James Ward-Prowse goes sideways, backwards. Alvarez, even though he's a CDM, his instinct is to go forward. He plays the ball forward. Potter does not want that. And that's the reason that James Ward-Prowse sits in that position. And Rios would be the same. Rios will play forward. He's destructive and everything else, but he ain't playing sideways and backwards. Not a chance.
Listen, guys, I'm going to tell you about a player.
Go on.
And unfortunately, I pride myself on being able to be the first to see players that other people don't see or have some kind of bias against. Who's one of your best players? We just finished talking about him. We just talked about Bowen.
Bowen, yeah.
But Bowen did not come to you from the Premier League, did he?
No, Hull. He came from Hull. Championship.
Right. One of your absolutely one of your better players, for example, he's a bit old now. That played left back from you didn't come from the Premier League to you. Creswell,
Antonio,
right?
a lot of them. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, absolutely. In fact, Antonio wasn't a striker when he came to your club, was he?
Antonio, for me, honestly, do you know how much I love that guy? And
No. I am getting to a point with my question. Yes, what I'm trying to say is that
I'm getting drunk.
A club like
sorry,
a club like West Ham. Sorry,
I said I'm getting drunk when I'm talking to you.
A club like West Ham has to be able to see out the outside of the box. I'm going to tell you about a player. Now, whether he can get a work permit in England at this moment in time, I am not sure. He should be able to.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you about a player, and you're hearing it exclusive here. Exclusive. This particular player, his name is Salvatore Esposito.
Okay, go on.
No, I've not even told you about him before.
No, you haven't.
Okay. Now, this player plays for a club who is in Serie B in Italy.
Yeah.
And he played for a club who just managed to miss out in the playoff and being promoted to Serie A.
Yeah.
This is one of the most dynamic midfield players. If you're talking about the likes of your Gattusos, your Makaleli, that kind of player.
Fucking hell.
Yes,
Yeah.
check him out. A
Yeah.
young Italian player. In fact, I think he's even been called before for the national team, even from Serie B.
This is what I'm talking about, people. I'm not joking. And we're dealing with these fucking idiots at this club that gives. Yeah, look. I'm not quoting you, by the way, but the fact of the matter. Well, I'm going to quote you on this. This is where West Ham's issue has come from. On the previous show that I did with X, and this is literally it. If a preferential agent, if a preferential agent had Lionel mess up, and somebody else from the outside, SportsX, brought them Lionel Messi, West Ham at the moment would sign Lionel Messi. That's what they would do, and that's how we've ended up with what we've got at the minute. It's just as simple as that.
Now let me also tell you something. Tell you another exclusive.
Go on.
Salvatore Esposito happened to have a brother who is called Pio Esposito.
Yeah.
And mark my word, remember the name, because the thing is, I've highlighted a lot of players over the years that a lot of people have taken credit for, including Skamaka,
Yeah.
including Lautaro Martinez, including Gonzalo Higuain, including Jaime Rodriguez. The truth is, really, the system tried to shut me up because I'm not one of the preferential, and my background is not from football, and for other reasons, more likely obvious, but I won't go there.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you now, if we're going to look at the likes of the lap and spend money we don't have or your club don't have,
Well, we've missed
mark
out.
my word,
We've missed out on Delap. He's gone to Chelsea.
maybe that's a blessing in disguise, because I'm telling you, if Inter Milan will sell you Esposito, Pio Esposito, sorry, the brother of Salvatore Esposito, those two players together would be absolutely dynamic for West Ham. Go, guys, check YouTube, check them out afterwards, and go back to Nick and tell him what your opinion on those two players. If we want player that can be very versatile and make you not even miss Kudas, then we need to look at Jean Arias of Fluminense.
Yeah, well, he's a player that we are again being linked with, because obviously, look, this is again via a SportsX thing. That's how they got alerted to Arias in the first place. But it's being linked in the media again. But he is a fantastic player, amazing. He's a Colombian, isn't he? Arias. He's the
Now, if we want a player that is absolutely dynamic, that can cover both left wing back and right wing back, then we ought to be looking at Flamengo, the player Wesley.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Okay.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I know. This was the last window. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. There's two different Wesley. There's Wesley the winger, who's currently at I think Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, so that one's gone to Saudi.
Yeah, yes, but he's still potentially available. Unfortunately, I'm cutting off my nose to spite my face here, because I'm trying to help you to identify players and to flag up players that nobody ain't talking about, but people will get the credit for, to potentially my detriment. But the reality is, because I'm not really actively involved at this moment in time, but I'm just telling you, as a friend of yours, and I know you're a fan that wants to see the best, those are amongst the players. There's also a player from I think it's Dynamo Kiev.
Yeah.
A central midfield player.
I remember this guy.
Believe me, when this player hits England or Europe, you will remember all about him.
Yeah.
Okay.
This was the Declan Rice replacement, effectively, wasn't it?
Absolutely. This player is also a big lad, and listen, this is for another show.
Yeah.
But in reality is, for every kudos that you can sell, you can get a better kudos somewhere else cheaper.
So to go back to the original point, if West Ham could sell Kudus even for 40 million, right, which is ridiculous money, and you sell Paqueta for 30 million, you've only made 70 million out of them. That's terrible in itself. But 70 million's a lot of money. And if you've got the right people that are going out there doing your recruitment, that's enough. That's enough. You'll be able to go out there. If you look at in the January transfer window, look at the state of our defence. We were offered, I did it live on a show. I took a phone call from SportsX with Agbadou, who's gone to Wolves. We were offered him first. We said no. Anyone that you talk to from Wolves, when you look at their resurgence, yes, their manager helped, but every Wolves fan will tell you how good Agbadou was. How much did he go there for in the end? It weren't a lot.
Well, no, it's about 15 million pounds.
Yeah, that's what he went for in the end.
Yeah.
So for not very much money, if you're identifying the right players, that's what can happen. Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating when you see the other side of it. I've got to be honest. But anyway, X, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll call it a night now because I'm going to wrap up because my other half's calling me. It's been a brilliant show. It really has. I've really enjoyed it.
The reality is, even if you got 70 million in, let's put it this way: the players that you're spending 70 million pounds to buy one player, is the same 70 million pounds that, for example, Rui Braz of Benfica has been used to buy 7 players.
Exactly.
And then sell each one of them for the price you're prepared to buy one of them for.
Yeah. I know. And that's the thing. And that's what West Ham haven't got. So at the moment, which is why, do you know when people usually be careful what you wish for? I'm talking to the audience here, like in terms of with Moyes, be careful what you wish for. That applies to players as well, because I don't think currently we can replace Kudus and Paqueta, even if we got stupid money for them, because I think we're going to struggle to attract them. We haven't got the people with the connections that are doing the deals. I think it's just going to be, hopefully we're proven wrong, but that's my genuine concern with this window. That is it. And the proof's there at the moment. We're in July. The players are reporting back to training on Monday. We've done fuck all. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
One of the reasons why I believe West Ham has not been performing well is that the players that are being recruited have not been recruited in time for them to assimilate into the team in pre-season. So they're almost players that are they're like players that are just being signed when the season starts, and they don't have any time to really fit into the system, and so they're actually being assimilated while the season is going on. That's never good.
No, it's never good. Before you go, I'm going to get you to answer one question to save me answering it. So this is Scott. I love Scott. But he says, I don't believe that, Nick. This was when we was talking about the manager being the issue and possibly it being the players. But he says, I don't believe that, Nick. I believe that the players are more the issue than Potter. How would you answer that to Scott, that comment? It's not Potter, it's the players that are the issue.
Well, if it's not, let me not say manager. If it's not the manager and it's just the players of the issue, let's stop signing managers and let's put players on the pitch.
Yeah.
Because the whole purpose of having a manager is to be able to get the players to perform. And if the manager is not held liable for any lack of performance, then it means there's no necessity to invest in a manager in the first place. Because the players are supposed to be the problem, then allow the players alone to go on the pitch and orchestrate how they play, and then level the entire problems at them.
Exactly that. Right. And on that, X, we're gonna call it a night, mate. Thank you very much for your time. That was really good, really insightful.
Not a problem. Nice to speak to you. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Speak to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Right. I hope you enjoyed that. He's honestly he's a great guy. I've known this guy for years now. And to be quite honest, when you watch him work and you see him work, there's no way that he shouldn't be involved at a club. If he was involved at West Ham, it would be very, very different. It would be very different. But he's kind of it's a situation where he is always, but they kind of get involved with him when it all goes bandy and they need to be pulled out of a hole, unfortunately. But people like him are the ones that we need involved at this club. But unfortunately, that's not the case. We've got a stupid cartel, and that's just a situation that we're in. But look, I hope that you enjoyed the show. There'll be plenty more coming with SportsX in the future. I'm going to answer this question here. Sam, love you, Nick, but these transfer shows are so pointless. You're not giving us any information. There's no fucking information. I know what you want, Sam. I love you as well. There is no information. You want me to tell you. Do you sign in tomorrow? We're signing Rios. We're signing the geezer, the Japanese bloke, the goalkeeper. We're signing him. That's what you want. You want me to give you that information. I can't because it ain't happening. It might happen in the future, but nothing's fucking happened. You're frustrated because West Ham ain't signing players. There's plenty of channels out there that are jumping on that sort of bandwagon. I'm not doing it. And I ain't going to criticise them channels either because do you know what? I've been involved in it. And now I'm on the outside and I'm looking in. I think fucking hell, Nick. Because I know I was heavily involved in January. I was heavily involved in all the windows before. And you get hooked into it. But now I just feel like it's all bollocks. I really do. Under this ownership. That's how I feel. I feel completely disconnected from this transfer window. And I reckon if I was to do shows where I basically just come in here and just dismiss rumours, 99.9% of the time I'd be right. Because they're all bollocks, most of them. But look, anyway, I'm sure it'll all start coming in. I hope you enjoyed the show anyway. That was very good. I'm very drunk. I'm very drunk. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this chair. I've done a bottle of Malbec. Drop a like on the video before you go, please. And yeah, leave a nice comment after the show for SportsX. He always reads them, and I will speak to you soon. Come on, you ones.